Hi guys, and many thanks for joining me. If you are new to my channel, hi, I'm Kat and I like to talk about crimes, investigations, missing people, conspiracy theories and everything related. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button below and also make sure you hit the notification bell so you are the first one to know about any new videos I upload. For my returning subscribers and returning viewers, I would like to thank you so much for all your continuous support and your lovely comments. Thank you. Today I want to talk to you about Jane Tanner's ever-changing statements, but before we get started, here is the disclaimer. I do not mean to be disrespectful to anyone I talk about in this video. The video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. The information I take is from the internet. I compile this information together and make a video. From the video, you guys are more than welcome to draw your own conclusions. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. In my opinion, Jane is the most important witness to make the abduction theory possible. She is, if you will, the wheel that drives the story, and in my opinion, someone had to be placed to have seen the abductor. Otherwise, the Mccanns, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on for the abduction theory. But there is one thing which seriously I don't understand. Why was Jane chosen in the first place? I think out of the whole group, she is the weakest link, and she's a terrible liar, seriously, in my opinion. I think potentially the whole group could have seen that, but I want to jump right in and start with May the 4th, 2007, and this is a day after Maddie's disappearance. During the morning of the 4th of May, Madeleine's parents and friends go to the Department of Criminal Investigations to be interviewed. At this time of the day, however, only Jerry Mccann, Matthew Oldfield and Jane Tanner are interviewed. But I have to say, contradictions already appear from their statements. Jane sees Jerry and Jazz Wilkins talking in the street. Jerry was on his way back from his apartment, where he checked to make sure his kids were sleeping, confirmed in his witness statement. Right after Jane passes Jerry and Jazz on the street, Jane notices a suspicious man carrying a child, probably Madeleine, according to her. Although it makes sense that both Jerry and the other man should have seen Jane, according to all of their statements, they didn't see each other. Really? So, according to Jane again, this abductor is carrying the child across his arms. Something like that, yeah? I'll be honest. I do not think I've ever seen anyone carrying a child like that across their arms whilst rushing to get out of the area. I mean, wouldn't that just slow them down? You know, it's not like you are carrying a bag of potatoes and you are putting them from one box to the other. You're literally carrying a child, a 3-year-old child, on the street in the night, rushing to get the hell out of there. Even with a heavy bag of potatoes, you would move it onto your shoulder because it makes it easier to carry, right? But no, it seems that in Jane's view, this abductor took his time to roam about the streets of Praia da Luz and work out whilst doing it, right? I mean, it's ridiculous, really, it is. Jazz Wilkins told the police that he didn't see Jane when speaking with Jerry, and it would have been impossible for someone to pass by him and for him not to notice the person. So, I don't know, I'm asking, Jane, were you that invisible that Jerry and Jazz didn't see you? How is it possible that someone passes by another person and only one party sees the other but not both? What? Are you serious? And are we really supposed to believe this, really? Jane, extremely sure of herself, she says the man was dressed in light colored trousers with hair down to his collar. it makes me laugh because, I don't know, maybe Jane had an LED loop like the ones you check jewelry with, you know, like, hello, I can see you. I mean, considering that she was being so specific. And then we also have Kate McCann. She is interviewed later the same day. She refers to the man who allegedly abducted Madeleine. She couldn't have known any features of the man other than what Jane told her, right? Jane was the only one who saw anyone. Yet Kate says the man has long hair and the man is wearing jeans. I mean, come on, seriously, at least if you're gonna lie, you know, just put your story straight. Don't let anyone try to find a reason to question your story. But there are so many questions in this story, really. But, you know, I guess maybe it doesn't really matter to you because the good people of the government will jump to your aid anyway, right? So I'm just guessing this was all just a facade. Let's just get those witness statements out there and done with, because anyway no one is gonna touch us, because that's how we are, right? Now, Jerry says that after midnight on the night of Maddie's disappearance, Jane described this man to Jerry as an individual with brown hair between 30 and 40 years old, wearing light-colored trousers. So, you have to make me understand this, really. Jane sees this man walking across, right? Which would mean she mostly saw him from profile only, right? So how can she be so certain that this individual is between 30 to 40 years old? I mean, did he turn around to have a look at her? To make sure that, you know, she can tell all those features? And then also in the police report, after arriving at the scene, Jane describes the individual as wearing light-colored trousers and a dark shirt. He's 1.78 meters tall, and this man was carrying a child, probably in pajamas. Jerry, who was interviewed before Jane was, gives a much more detailed description of the man according to what Jane or O'Brien told him. So, my question again is, why didn't Jane say this to the first officers on the scene then? Why did she keep this description so vague? I mean, it really doesn't add up, does it? But I think the reason why Jerry was so specific was because this would have been the optimum description of the man. Hear me out. Give specific details to make the man real, right? The police would then have enough information to make the story believable. He's also saying 1.78 meters tall, but how could someone have such a specific recollection of exactly how tall this man was? It's not like they were carrying a measuring tape around with them. Come on, let's be serious. But I also think that Jerry was trying to influence and give indications to Jane's statement. So then later she would change it with more specific details, which of course she did, didn't she? Jerry and the group, I think at one point they probably realized that Jane was not doing such a good job at providing credible information, so they probably all agreed on how this man will look like. Jane is interviewed at the police station at around 11:30 in the morning. Now, she has really specific details. Go figure. So the first time she didn't really have that many details, but then the next day she's remembering better. Oh wow, memories. Now the man is between 30 to 40 years old, which is even a narrower age group to what she told Jerry. He's thin and he's 1.70 meters tall. Jane can now tell with certainty that the color of this man's hair is dark brown and falls over his collar. He's wearing cream or beige trousers and black classic shoes. He was rushing with a child in his arms, which seemed to be asleep. But Jane only sees the legs of the child, and she also notices that the child is wearing pajamas, which were obviously cotton, light in color, Maybe white or pale pink with flowers, maybe. But why is she saying obviously cotton? How can she know for sure that these pajamas were actually cotton? They could have been any material, so I can't really figure out why she would assume these are cotton, really. Now, if you have a look at this photo, at 10 p.m., the street where Jane allegedly spotted the man carrying the child away is really dark. See? This is how low the visibility is. So, how can Jane describe this man at the end of the road so accurately? How can she make out so many details at this time of night in this low visibility? I find it really hard to believe that you can actually say this man has dark brown hair or he's got light colored trousers, which seem to be linen. So she's even mentioning they seem to be linen. It's exactly the same thing like with the cotton. I don't know in which world to Jane this statement and description of the man makes sense to her. I have no idea. I really don't have any idea. But as we all know, in the dark the visibility is low and it's impossible for the human eye to make so specific details and to remember so many specific details about a person. It's not like the person was right in front of them under a lamppost, right? No, the person was quite further away from her, and the area where the man allegedly has crossed the road was really dark at 10 o'clock in the evening. I mean, you've seen the photo, you can tell. It's impossible to make out so many details. There's also a significant factor of the 9 story. Jane Tanner left the table at 9:15 to check on her children in 5D. She then claims to have seen Jerry and Jazz Wilkins without them seeing her, and she sees a man carrying a child away from the Mccanns' apartment. The police statements of the tapas staff working that night mentions that only 2 of the tapas 9 left the table, and they were both men and they both left individually. No one else from the group was seen leaving before the alarm was raised by Kate. So as far as I understand from the tapas staff statements, in fact, Kate didn't leave the table, Jane didn't leave the table, no one left the table apart from 2 individuals, which were potentially Jerry and O'Brien, I believe. Svetlana Vitorino, which was a kitchen assistant at the tapas, said to the police possibly Jerry Mccann left the table for around 30 minutes, which would give him plenty of time to dispose of Madeleine's body, in my opinion. Ricardo Oliveira, the bar worker who served the Mccanns, told police he remembers seeing Russell O'Brien leaving the table. Joaquin Batista, a waiter at the tapas, said a skinny male left the table for 15 minutes and then another male left the table for 30 minutes. A couple of hours after the alarm is raised by Cat Mccann, Russell O'Brien, Jane Tanner's husband, grabs Maddie's activity book and writes 2 timelines, as I mentioned in my previous video with Gonzalo Amaral book. Both of these lists begin with the group going for dinner at the tapas and their movements until the alarm is raised. But I'm really wondering here, why would he have to use Maddie's activity book? I mean, it's really sad. I would assume because a child disappeared, you would cherish this book as a memory, just like the cuddle cat. But I mean, yeah, you know, Kate, she felt compelled to wash the cuddle cat. He was too dirty and smelly. Really, honestly, I don't know what parent would wash the last thing their child potentially touched before disappearing. No, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I don't even want to go further and mention the jogging and the tennis playing after Maddie's disappearance. And then there's also another thing. Why would you write a list of what you did during the evening? And not 1, but 2. It doesn't make sense, does it? a child goes missing and you think writing a list is so important than to try and find that child? I really don't get it at all. No. And and why was so important for them to have a list anyway? But I do believe that really these lists were necessary if they were to come up with a cover-up story. It had to make sense. It had to match. All the members of the group had to have had a role in this timeline, because if one is not included or not added at the correct time, everything crumbles and the abduction theory is not possible anymore. Jane had to see the man carrying a child, otherwise how would you explain the abduction? And in my opinion, only people who lie would go to such lengths to even write a list. Someone who is honest about their day, they will know what they did without even writing it down, right? You know, I actually imagine O'Brien sitting at the Mccanns table saying, right, come on guys, let's do this. We should agree on what we did this evening, because, you know, we need to cover our asses, right? And maybe Jerry, when he comes back from hiding Maddie's body, he can double check the list. Hence, Jerry's name was written on one of the lists. If Jane Tanner went back to 5D at 9:40 p.m. to let O'Brien finish his dinner, he would have written down on the timeline, but there's nothing about Jane Tanner leaving the table at that time. O'Brien's timelines and the Tapa staff statements show that Jane Tanner didn't leave the restaurant at 9:40 p.m. O'Brien tells Jerry at 1 a.m. in apartment 5A that Jane had seen the man, according to Jerry's statement. But at 1 a.m., 2 police officers were in the apartment 5A, and although finding out about Jane Tanner's sighting, Jerry is not telling his wife anything about it. He's not telling the police officers about the sighting. He's not talking to Jane Tanner about it, and above all, he doesn't go in the street looking for that man who would potentially have Madeleine. So, to understand this, Jerry finds out about Jane's sighting at 1 a.m. He doesn't inform the police or anyone else, and he rather lets staff, neighbors, police officers and the community to search the whole night for Madeleine, but not once he's mentioning who they should be looking for. What? How is that even possible? How? How can such a thing be ignored by a presumably worried parent who just, you know, lost their daughter? It doesn't make sense. Nothing about this makes sense at all. At around 1 a.m. on the night of Maddie's disappearance, Matthew Oldfield is calling Jazz Wilkins to tell him Jerry wants to know what Jazz had seen. But Oldfield never said to Jazz about the man carrying a child, and when Jazz asked if he could help with the search, he even refused. Okay, it's a weird thing to call someone to ask what they have seen. It's weird, and on top of that, to actually refuse when the help is given. But which makes me think, what if Jerry was the one carrying Madeleine and Oldfield actually called Jazz just to make sure he hasn't seen anything? Maybe that's why Jerry wanted to know. So, according to the Mccanns, Matthew Oldfield went to check on Maddie and the twins at 9:30 in the evening, but he didn't see Madeleine. If Oldfield would say that he saw Maddie, he would be incriminating himself as the last person to have seen her alive. Then, also, if he would claim to have seen Madeleine, Jane Tanner couldn't possibly have seen the abductor carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. This only means that Madeleine was missing before 9:30, even before 9:15. Jerry said he saw Maddie asleep at 9:05 p.m. So, if we believe for a second that this is true, stay with me, the abductor would only have around 10 minutes from 9:05 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. 10 minutes to take Madeleine sleeping from her bed, then go out the window with Maddie and vanish. which doesn't sound realistic at all. But do you know what I think spoils this plan for the Mccanns? The unexpected encounter of Jerry with Jazz Wilkins. I think it was a true shock for Jerry to get out of that apartment and see Jazz. But he couldn't just ignore Jazz and head over to the tapas, so he really had to have a few minutes conversation like any other normal person would. The abductor couldn't possibly just pass by Jane, Jerry and Jazz and head to 5A to take Madeleine. No, it's impossible. In my opinion, Jerry didn't even see Madeleine sleeping at 9:05 p.m. I think she was already dead. They had to come up with this story just like they planned the tapas night in a hurry. The whole group has a really clever way of trying to confuse the investigation from the beginning. They need to make sure they won't be accused of Maddie's disappearance. That's why the abductor scene was so important. He had to be there, otherwise there would be no plausible story of abduction. This seems like a really well rehearsed script out of a movie, really. Even Jane Tanner's recognition of Robert Murat, I think even this was planned ahead. Didn't she say in yet another of her statements that the abductor headed over into the direction of Murat's house? And I think this is yet again another diversion tactic. She also said in a statement that she would recognize the abductor from behind if she would see him again. To this extent, Amaral and his team arranged for a possible identification from Jane Tanner. They sit her in an unmarked police car with tinted windows. She can see outside, but no one can see who's in the car. The car is parked exactly in the same spot she said she was on Thursday evening when she spotted the abductor. Robert Murat, in between plainclothed police officers, goes up the road in the same way the abductor allegedly did. Jane Tanner is certain she recognizes him by the way he walked. But does he really resemble the picture Jane painted previously? I think not. He's not the man with the hair over his collar, he's not the slim man she said the abductor is. But at this stage, Murat fits for Jane and the group because he can be made a scapegoat and the Mccanns wouldn't be suspected. After Jane recognizes him so easily, obviously the rest of the members of the group now say they all remember seeing Murat in the area on the night of Maddie's disappearance. How convenient, right? It's like a puzzle and we make everything fit together. Later on, however, and of course to be expected, Jane changes her mind yet again and says it wasn't Murat she saw that night. That she only said that because she was panicked thinking the police kidnapped her. Oh my god. Oh my god. Who would even believe what she says? Really, seriously. So you tell me, you are put in an unmarked police car, right? And you think you're being kidnapped? Oh my god, I mean, how stupid is that? I'm sure that she went on her own agreement in that police car, as I'm pretty sure that she already knew what's gonna happen. So, I mean, how mentally sick can you even be to believe we would buy something like that? I think you must be delusional if you think that someone in their right mind would actually believe this. Really? Oh my god. Oh my god, how is this even possible? But, you know what, I'll give her that. Jane did get one thing right out of the whole sighting. The beige or cream colored trousers with buttons that the alleged abductor had. But you see who the trousers belong to? There you go. That's Jerry Mccann. And this is the same pair of trousers on the Mccanns' bed in 5A photos, which I believe were taken on the same night of Maddie's disappearance. And if this is true, and they are Jerry's trousers indeed, The audacity on this man to wear the same trousers he used to carry Maddie's body with. Oh my god, this is unbelievable. So very disrespectful of his own daughter, really. As if he wants to show us all we can't touch him, we can't break him, and we can't accuse him. Even if we want to, nothing is gonna happen to him. Nothing. All this evidence based on the Portuguese police case files, which includes TAPA's employee statements, Russell O'Brien's statement, Jazz Wilkins' statement, the actions the group took after the alarm was raised, proves to me that Jane Tanner's sighting was made up by the whole group. Because this sighting was fake, Madeleine Mccann was not abducted. And before I end this video, there's something I want to add. I believe in this world there are two types of liars. And I will make reference to people I know as comparison. Let's just say type 1 of the liars, yeah? I remember with my sister, since we were around 12 or 13 years old, she had a really bad habit of lying, and she still does it. However, no matter how much she tries lying, I always, and not only me, everyone else always catches her, and we always did, because she's not giving so much importance to the way she lies, as in, if it makes sense, if the lie makes sense, but she gives more importance to the fact that she wants to lie, right? So even though in her head it might make sense, to others it doesn't. For this reason, she is a terrible, terrible liar. No matter how much she tried and tries to lie, you can clearly tell that she is lying. That's why Jane, to me, it's exactly this type of liar. Then we also have type 2 of liar, right? When I used to work as a team leader, I remember very well one of my managers. He was always lying about anything and everything for no reason whatsoever, and he would lie so much and for so long, even he would end up believing his own lie and living it. The problem with this type of lying, however, is that even the liar will become confused at some point, because they won't even remember what the lie was about, what truth was it meant to replace. I guess that also this would be called compulsive lying. So anyway, guys, I have no idea if I made any sense here. I don't know if you guys encounter such people, but I firmly believe everyone lies at one point or another in their lives. But it's what truth we are trying to cover with a lie. That's the most important. Like, for example, lying you didn't wake up because your alarm didn't go off in the morning, when you know very well you stopped the alarm to sleep longer. That's nothing. Nothing in comparison to lying to cover your ass because you committed a crime.
Warning, the following video contains instances of extreme violence. Viewer discretion is advised.
So I've been looking on the internet to see if there's any more of Amaral's books for sale online in the UK, and I actually found a place where I found a few of the books, but unfortunately I couldn't find any book which is in English. So what I could find was a Portuguese version of the book. I think it was also a Danish version of the book, and an Italian one. So guys, if you are interested to buy them, I'm leaving the links in the description below. And also I think that there is a used book for sale on eBay UK, and yeah, I don't think yes, you can find the PDF versions as well on eBay, but you know, I honestly do prefer to have the paperback, so actually a book to hold in my hand. Too much technology nowadays. Today I want to talk to you about the Smithman, or the Smith sighting, whichever way you wanna name it, still the same thing. Whilst I did make up my mind who the Smithman is, and I will reveal to you a bit later on in the video who I think it is, please do let me know in the comments below if you really do believe that the Smith sighting is real or fake. Okay, so I just want to start with a bit of an introduction into the Smith sighting. The Smiths from Ireland are spending their holiday in Praia da Luz. After dinner at the Dolphin restaurant, they head over to Kelly's bar, which is just 50 meters away from the restaurant. They leave the bar at around 9:55 in the evening and head over to their apartment in Estrela da Luz, which is west of the Ocean Club. The Smith family is a big family, 4 adults and 5 children. And long story short, let's just keep it short, the group spreads out, with the children never too far away from the adults. The streets are empty. They climb some steps to reach 25 de Abril Street, they cross it and turn left into 1 de Mayo Street, which runs to the west side of the Ocean Club. After no more than 30 meters, they see a man walking in the middle of the street, holding a child in his arms, with the head resting on his left shoulder. Remember, as I mentioned in my previous video, Jane Tanner sighting, as I said, it would have been impossible for someone to carry a child across the arms, as Jane said. And no, I don't believe for a second Jane's sightings was real. Even if Dr. Todman came forward a long while later after the alleged abduction, he was carrying his child in the opposite direction of Jane Tanner's alleged abductor, and they also knew each other from tennis, so I think that he probably assumed Jane's sighting was in fact her seeing him carrying his child to his apartment. And then we also have David Payne's statement, where he has quite some slips of tongues, and he refers to she as Jane as carrying the child, since the police officer asked about she, Jane. Not only that, but he also says in his statement, my recollection was more about the description of the pajamas not fitting in with the description of the newspaper. And if I was to say that she was carrying the child, you know, like this, and then he goes on and on and on, and then he also apologizes for saying that she was carrying the child, and now he says, if you were carrying the child. So, what do we understand from this? What I understand is that a liar has slips of tongue, and without even realizing, he spills the truth, because a lie is much harder to control and keep it consistent. Whereas if you tell the truth, then you don't need to control yourself. You know, it just comes out. Words just come out of your mouth. You speak the truth. Nothing wrong about that. And then he's also saying the description of the pajamas doesn't fit with the newspaper. I mean, is it really a joke? Why even say that? Clearly, if it would be the truth, then the description of the pajamas wouldn't change at all, would it? It doesn't need to fit, it just needs to be true and real. But now, let's get back to the Smiths, okay? The way that this man is holding the child is much more plausible than the Tannerman. The girl's head is resting on his shoulder, her arms are hanging by her side, and she's wearing pale-colored pajamas, bare feet with blonde hair that covers her neck. The man is wearing cream-colored or beige trousers. He's around 30 to 35 years old and between 170 meters to 180 meters tall. His brown hair cut short and face tanned. So, okay. The Smiths in the end they return to Ireland. After their return there, they follow the case and they find out that according to Jane's statements, Murat is the man seen on the night of the abduction. Mr. Smith contacts the Irish police and insists the man they saw carrying a child was not Murat, because Mr. Smith knew Murat. Amaral and his team, at this point, they secretly organized for the Smiths to return to Portugal, and on 26th of May 2007, they interviewed the father and the son in the offices of the Department of Criminal Investigation in Portimao. Both say because of the light conditions at night, they wouldn't be able to recognize the man carrying the child, but they do describe clearly the way this man was holding the child and how he was walking. They then go back to the scene with the investigators, where they point the precise place where they came across the man. The Smith statements and their Portugal visit remain secret. and in a few days they return to Ireland and contact is being maintained. After more than 4 months in the Algarve, the Mccanns return to England, where they are greeted in such a way like the liberation of hostages held for years in far-off countries. Welcome back, King and Queen. And of course, the BBC and so many other news channels are broadcasting the news of their arrival. In Ireland, the Smiths are watching the news showing the same event. They instantly recognize the man they saw on the night of Maddie's disappearance. Mr. Smith, after seeing the other news channels, is certain the man they saw was Jerry Mccann, by the way he's holding the child and the way he's walking. He contacts the police and waits to be called back. Amaral and the team find out at the end of September, and they start to understand why Jane Tanner sent the alleged abductor in the opposite direction to that taken by the man seen by the Smith family. She had to divert suspicion away from Jerry, who, if guilty, would have taken this route. So that's why, in my opinion, I think she came up with the abductor story. With the agreement of the National Director of the Judiciary Police, Amaral is trying to get the Smiths back to Portugal for an identification of Jerry. Everything is set in motion, all details sorted, and now all that's left is to choose the hotel they'll be staying at. And I like to add here a quote from Amaral's book. But the Smiths were never to come back to Portugal. After my departure, the PJ were to change their minds. They asked the Irish police to proceed with interviewing the witness. That decision was to seriously delay the process, since the Smiths were not interviewed until several months later. Meanwhile, rumors were to circulate, and people not involved with the investigation would be made aware of the existence of this witness. Someone allegedly even sought out contact with the family without it being known to what end. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the Mccanns circle doing this. Maybe the idea was to silence them? I don't know, but something weird happened, didn't it? I mean, it's quite known, in my opinion, that they are trying to sort of keep those people who are against them quiet. That then would make the Smith sighting real, right? That then would mean that one of the group's members would be the man seen by Mr. Smith. But let's think about it this way, okay? Jane goes to check on the kids at 9:15. She spots a man carrying a child. The alarm is raised at around 10 p.m. or so, right? And at around the same time, the Smiths see a man carrying a child. Logically, if we are to believe Jane's sighting, then the same man is spotted by the Smith family. That man, at that time and at that location, could be doing only one of three things, in my opinion. Abduct a sleeping child, carry a deceased body, or innocently going home with his sleeping child. And that's what the Smith family believed initially, that the man was going home with his sleeping child. In the case of abduction and carrying a deceased body, as logic dictates, the person wouldn't want to be seen, right? If this cannot be avoided by any means, then the person would try to behave as naturally as possible as to not raise suspicion. The instinct here would be to avoid other people seeing you, right? On the other hand, however, if we talk about a man carrying his own child, then he couldn't care less who sees him. But let's go back to the Smith family. We know there are 9 people, okay? 9 people heading to their apartment after a night out around 10 in the evening. Narrow street, dark and silent. Now, can you imagine a group of people being so silent that the man trying to hide something or avoid being seen cannot hear them? I really think not. No. He's trying to... So, imagine this. The abductor, yeah? Let's say the abductor. He's trying to get the hell out of there. His adrenaline kicks in. He's probably even sweating, heavy breathing, whatever. His senses are heightened. So, I have to ask the question. Why didn't he use an alternative route? It's clear he heard all these people. He knew where he's heading, just as he knew he could have avoided the encounter. What I want to point here is, this man, on this night, on this street, he wants to be seen. No doubt in my mind, he wants to be seen. You know that child is wearing light-colored pajamas, barefoot, similar to the child which was just abducted, not even half a mile away. So this makes me realize that the sighting was provoked and it was planned all along. And this was definitely not by chance. The Smith says the man looks like Jerry at some point later on, as I mentioned above. So I need to know, why was Jerry walking around Praia da Luz wanting to be seen carrying a child dressed like Madeleine in his arms on the night of the alleged abduction, around the same time that Kate sounds the alarm? And he's not seen only once, he's seen 3 times. The Smiths are scattered in around 3 groups as per their PJ statements. And funny enough, this man is seen by all 3 groups and he even passes by them. If you still think that the man was caught off guard by the Smiths, I think you are completely wrong. The 3 groups, they don't all walk at the same pace, do they? I mean, you have a 4-year-old who is slower than the adults, then you have another person feeling ill, then you also have the steps. So I'm quite sure they were scattered, some in front of the others. This man has plenty of opportunities to actually change his route to avoid being seen. The family is walking slowly uphill in his direction and he's walking downhill towards them, right? I'm asking, why is he not changing direction but he goes head on towards them? He's first passing by Smith's son, the second time by Smith's father, and then he reaches the corner, right? At this point, he can already hear the noise from the last group who are on the stairs or the steps, okay? So, let's say for a moment that he is the abductor. Again, I'm going by logic here. Even though these people won't find out exactly then what happened, maybe only a few days later, let's say, as an abductor, you would still try to avoid too many witnesses, right? It's enough you've already been seen by 2 groups, so you should just turn right as to avoid being seen by the rest. But what is this man doing? Oh my god! Oh my god! He goes straight towards the stairs where he already knows there are more witnesses. And this tells me he doesn't only want to be seen, but also to be seen heading towards the sea, towards the beach. Let me clarify this. I don't think he knew he will meet the Smiths. No. I think that this actually happened by chance. But when he left, from where he left, his intention was to be seen carrying someone who looks just like Madeleine, heading in the direction of the beach. You might be asking why this route? He had to go to the only area where he would be sure he's seen by people, where there is some sort of movement at that time in the night, and that is Kelly's bar. And I'm pretty sure if he wouldn't encounter the Smiths, he would just go in the direction of Kelly's bar, waiting for some movement and making himself seen. And things went exactly how he planned. Exactly. So, I got to the point where, yes, I do believe that Jerry Mccann is the Smithman. But I don't believe he carried the deceased body of Maddie when the Smiths saw him. Yes, I do believe he carried Maddie's body, but that was over a shorter distance and not now, when he was spotted by the Smiths. There are also people saying that how could he possibly carry a sedated child as he could be recognized? But I need to ask, recognized by who exactly? I mean, most of their time on holiday, they spent it at Ocean Club, the tennis club, the tapas, and their apartments. They've been once to the beach, they went jogging and so on. So, in my opinion, there's very little chance that anyone in Praia da Luz knew them before Maddie's disappearance. What I think is, Kate prematurely sounded the alarm. I think that it was done too quickly. And it seems that Jerry was really angry that night. Kate was also angry, punching the walls, leaving bruises on herself the next day. But what parent gets angry on the night of their daughter's disappearance? Seriously, I mean, yes, you are upset. Okay, I get it. Panicked, most definitely. Scared, yes, of course. But anger, that comes much later. Now there's the question of the child being carried. Is the child asleep? Sedated? Dead? I can definitely say this child was not asleep. Why? Why, you ask me maybe. If you look at this, taken I think on the 4th of May, you can see outside is not hot. They are wearing jackets, so it is a chill, cold night. Now, imagine a child in pajamas, barefoot, with no jacket, no blanket, being carried at least 400 meters in the cold. Wouldn't that child wake up? I mean, yes, don't get me wrong. I know that children are usually warmer in general, at least that's the case with me and my children. But when we sleep, our body temperature goes down. That's why we usually need covers to sleep. That's why when we are cold, we wake up. And it's impossible for this child to be sleeping and not wake up. And if we are to believe it was the abductor with Madeleine, she would wake up from the cold. And do you think she would be so silent finding herself in the arms of a stranger? Really? I mean, that's quite impossible. It is impossible. It's impossible. Let's get to the other option now, which would be the dead child. The Smiths see the man carrying the child. The child's head is resting on the man's shoulder. If the child would be dead, the man wouldn't be able to carry the body in that position. Why? Look at this and then I'll explain it in my next point. I'm sorry for the photo. I hope it's not triggering anything. I'm just trying to prove a point here. You see the mom is holding the baby, which passed away. And pay attention to the baby's head. See how it's tilted backwards? Because there's no muscle there which works. There's nothing to hold the head in the upright position. We know that the Smith said the abductor was not supporting the child's head with his hand. And now I want to ask you this. You do know why a newborn's head has to be supported, right? Because their muscles are too weak to hold the head. Which brings me to the sedation part. We already covered the child couldn't have been sleeping. It was too cold. They would wake up. Yeah. The difference between the dead body of a child in terms of muscles and the child being sedated is that the sedated child still has control of their muscles. Yes, they are sedated, but the blood is still flowing. The muscles are still working. You know when you fall asleep without realizing and you drop your head and by instinct you get it back up. You are still asleep, but it's your brain who is signaling, hey, your head, back up. Although sedated, the child can still control their reactions. The Smith said the man carrying the child did not support the head. Comparing to the deceased child, however, where the blood is not flowing, that's it. There's no support for the head, there's no brain activity, the muscles are stiff, the head falls backwards. A man couldn't possibly carry a deceased child for at least 400 meters without someone realizing something is wrong. Because, I'm really sorry, and I really do hate saying this, but a dead child doesn't look the same as a sedated or sleeping child. I'm trying to be sensitive, but I also need to be realistic, and I'm really sorry again. I also wanted to add a photo of such child being carried to show you an example, but I couldn't get myself to do it, so sorry. And I really don't want to get into more details, you know, about gravitation, physics, medicine, and so on. I mean, I think you get the idea anyway. But you might be asking yourself, why do I say the 400 meters distance? If you would believe Jane Tanner's sighting was real and it was Maddie seen by the Smiths, then the distance would be 700 meters, the route taken to east, past Murat's house, and then turning back west where the sighting happened. If you believe, like I do, that Maddie was not the child being carried, then the distance becomes 400 meters, because the man turns west immediately after leaving apartment 5A. So, my conclusion is, the child carried by Jerry Mccann where the Smith sighting happened was sedated and alive, which means that Jerry was not carrying Madeleine in the Smith sightings. Jerry was carrying another child. So we know the man is seen heading towards the beach, right? And one would assume he's going there to hide the body. I'll tell you something else which makes me believe Jerry didn't at that point head to the beach carrying a body to hide it. He wanted to be seen carrying a body heading towards the beach. Again, as a diversion tactic. It's not the first time, is it? So we are quite used to them trying all sorts of diversion tactics, so it's nothing new here. But why do I believe that? Well, please do have a look at this photo. This is the road leading to the beach. Two important things. One, you can see the lamppost, which means even if you would go at 10 p.m. when dark, that tiny area there is still visible. There's still a bit of light, and there would be people sleeping or, I don't know, doing whatever in their houses. So he can't really risk carrying and burying a body at the beach. A second thing, the dog sign. Please notice the dog sign, which means there are dogs walking about in the area, and we know how dogs are. They dig holes in the sand and so on. So again, not a good place to hide the body, unless you want the dog to smell the... yes. Then the most important, we also have kids going to the beach. And what do kids do at the beach? In the sand? They build sandcastles. They build sandcastles. They dig holes. They play in the sand. By the next morning after Maddie's disappearance, not everybody knew a child had disappeared. So naturally, kids would be at the beach, right? No one would think hiding a body in the sand is such a good idea. The police also scoured the whole area with dogs, and they couldn't find anything apart from some black beanbags. And you can't say that a man like Jerry Mccann going on holiday in a place he's never been before will know the beach better than the local police. No, that's impossible. Yes, he did go to the beach, I know, but that's not enough time to scan the whole area to find a hiding spot. Yes, I know there are sewer pipes, but they are quite hidden, and if you're not a local, it's quite difficult to spot it. And even if you do, the body would definitely be found, because the locals, they know the place, which means kids of the locals know the place. And don't tell me there would be no kids playing in those sewer pipes, because I wouldn't believe you. No. You know, that's such a great place for a kid to actually hide his treasure chest, or play hide and seek. And there are kids who actually play treasure hunting and hiding their treasures, like little toy that they fancy and their favorite toys and so on. And now I'm gonna show you some photos of how we could get to this sewer on the beach. The sewer is located 30 to 40 meters from nearby houses, which clearly proves it is well known to local residents. There are also no crevices on the beach where a body could be hidden. Okay, so let's say that the Smith sighting took place at around 10 p.m., right? But let's benefit with the man carrying the child and say it was at about 9:50 p.m. Let's say that from there to the sewer area it took about 10-15 minutes. It was dark and presumably Jerry's been down there only once before. So that makes it around 10 p.m., 10:05 p.m. This is how the access would look like. Please have a look here. It's a day and a night comparison. You can't tell me with these photos that a person who doesn't know the area would be able to find the sewer in these light conditions. No. Then his mobile phone rings. Kate gave the alarm. Walking back to the resort would take around 20 minutes. Then there's also the sand. If Jerry would have been carrying Maddie's body to the beach, he would definitely have some traces of sand. Not some, but quite a lot. I mean, you know, like when you take your kids to the playground, you guys play in the sand, and when you get home, the sand is everywhere. You just can't get rid of it. Oh, that's so annoying, actually. And then, after the alarm is raised, we already all know what happened. The effort made after the Smith's characteristics does show similarities to Jerry McCann. Actually, Mr. Smith is 60 to 80% certain it was Jerry he saw. So in those light conditions, in the night, I would say that the accuracy is acceptable. As it seems, findings by former MI5 agents long kept under wraps by the Mccanns included 2 efforts. And these images are of the suspected kidnapper which the Smith saw that night, which we know is allegedly Jerry McCann. Find Madeleine found silenced Henry Exton, an ex-MI5 undercover operation chief, and his team with a lawyer's letter, which would bind them to the confidentiality of a report they compiled which contained controversial information. The report was eventually delivered in November 2008, and this, although gave very little credibility to Jane Tanner's sighting, it focused more on the Smith sighting. These images were not even published in Kate's book from 2011, although the book has 8 key sightings with their corresponding efforts, but the Smith sighting is not there. I'm not surprised. If it's something which can incriminate them, is nowhere to be found, is it? It's always disregarded, disposed of, hidden, and so on. This report is said to question parts of the Mccanns' evidence, contains sensitive information about Madeleine's sleeping patterns, and raises the highly sensitive possibility that she could have died in an accident after leaving the apartment herself from one of the 2 unsecured doors. Okay, moving on to my next point. Let's not for a second get confused here. In my opinion, Jerry did dispose of Maddie's body, but not when he was seen by the Smiths. I believe that the child Jerry was carrying was actually Ella O'Brien, who is strikingly similar to Madeleine. For the abductor story to make sense, there had to be a flow between Jane's sighting and the Smith sighting. That was making sure the alleged abductor is seen by someone carrying a child towards the beach. What would that tell you if you would not have more information apart from a child being abducted? Let's say you are new to this, you see a man carrying a child, you learn that the child was abducted and that man is heading toward the beach. So, what would you think the man would be doing heading towards the beach with the child? That the man carrying the child is heading to the beach either to dispose of the body or take a boat and leave the area. The first option to me is much more plausible than the second. The Smiths were not tactically selected, but it was beneficial to Jerry and the plan, and he went with it. It was even better for Jerry actually, because he didn't have to wonder about making sure that he's being seen. So quite honestly, to Jerry, the Smiths being where they were at that time, it was a blessing. For him it was. The only thing that I can't really have an opinion about, or rather no idea about, is where Maddie's body would be. Where would Jerry hide her? I mean, it had to be somewhere he was familiar with, right? But also somewhere quite remote. But somewhere where he would know that no one would look. It also had to be somewhere closer to 5A, but again, maybe a private property that we don't know about. I don't know, I have no idea. I'm thinking it could very well be somewhere inside, but really I just can't figure it out. I do believe, however, that when the Mccanns and the group came up with this cover-up, They had no idea it will amount to such a phenomenal international response. And they probably had no idea that more than 10 years later, it would still be this huge. The problem is, now that they are in the public eye, they really can't stop carrying on with the farce. They can't stop it, because if they do, and if they would, then they would be seen as behaving suspiciously. And again, all they want to do is take suspicion away from them. So, I mean, I don't know, I guess whether they like it or not, they'll have to carry on if, you know, they don't want to look suspicious. But it does have its perks, I think, doesn't it? I mean, you get money, you get fame, you get recognition, and so on. So it's quite beneficial as well for them. And that's all for today's video. Make sure that you subscribe and you hit the notification bell, because my next video will be about Clarence Mitchell. And please don't forget to join the Facebook groups I mentioned at the beginning of the video. It would be really, really helpful. Thank you. Also, if you are interested to buy the paperback book of Gonzalo Amaral's, again, check the links in the description below. Thank you so much, guys, for watching today. Take care and stay safe. Bye bye.